Hello, friend Lacey Camp. You're listening to No Small Endeavor. This is our unabridged interview with conservationist Paul Rosolie. I loved this interview, and I find Paul just fascinating. This is about Paul's work, his life that he's given to doing conservation work in the Amazon. As you'll hear, he is a first-rate adventurer doing things that often sound absolutely crazy, and yet he's given all of that to doing something that we all desperately need, whether we realize it or not. So enjoy this interview with Paul Rosolie on his latest book, Jungle Keepers, What It Takes to Save the World. Enjoy. Hey, friend, if you didn't know, I started a newsletter a while back that comes out every 2 weeks. I have been delighted to hear from so many of you about positive response to the newsletter. We call it the No Small Endeavor Notebook, where I riff on themes and topics related to our podcast, giving you additional material for thinking and doing in your own quest to make sense of what it might mean to live a good life. Join us by going now to nosmallendeavor.com and sign up there. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com to sign up now for our free No Small Endeavor Notebook newsletter. Paul Rosolie, welcome.
Thanks for having me. How's it going?
It's great. How about yourself? In New York City for the big book launch.
Yes, in a very different jungle today than usual.
Well, congratulations on the new book. It's a beautiful book, and it's a wonderful book, and I very much enjoyed reading it. So, yeah. I wonder if you would start us with talking about being a dyslexic kid in Brooklyn who then kind of feels this undeniable calling for the wild and dropping out of high school and then finding your way to the Amazon. What's some of your earliest memories about what that experience was like for you as a young kid?
Well, I mean, as a kid, first of all, I mean, anybody with dyslexia knows you process information differently. So school was very sort of traumatic from the start because you have people, they give you, even in first grade, they give you those multiplication sheets where, it's 4 times 4 and 6 times 3 and 9 times 2. And I didn't even know what any of that meant. Everything I was still doing my twos were backwards and so multiplying them was far beyond my comprehension. And so they'd give you this sheet and they'd say, well, do 20 problems in the next few minutes. And I had no idea what that meant. So there was one day famously that I ran out of the classroom, out the doors of the school and sat under an oak tree because that's where I felt safe. And I don't know why. It's very strange being born in Brooklyn, and then my parents moved to the suburbs, and we had access to trees and nature, but all I cared about was animals. Dinosaurs first, of course. Yeah. And then, but once I got a little bit older, it was frogs, snakes, wildlife documentaries, David Attenborough documentaries, Steve Irwin, and because I couldn't read, I mean, my parents read us Jane Goodall, Lord of the Rings, James Herriot, Sherlock Holmes. They read us all this stuff. And so stories were constantly going into the young mind. So it was always stories. And so again, from first grade, I think I went to 3 different first grades. I tried public school, Catholic school, and then I finally ended up in a Rudolf Steiner Waldorf school. And that was fun. That was good because they don't need you to read or do multiplication at first. They're more concerned with stories and developing the young mind. And so that there's multiple recesses a day so that you can be out in nature. And so that helped me. I was there for a few years, but once I got thrown back into the public school system, I mean, school was painful. I hated school. It was constantly a fish out of water, constantly in detention, constantly be told I couldn't sit still. I misunderstood the assignment. I did the assignment wrong. I took the wrong bent on the essay. And so, by sophomore year of high school, I was just losing my mind. And a friend's mother said to me, she said, if you hate sitting at your desk now, just wait till you get out of school and you get your office job like everybody else and you get your permanent desk, the one you're going to stay at till you die. And that just haunted me. And I said, you know what? And I spoke to my parents and they said, look, if you're in this much agony, they said, drop out of high school. We need you to go to college. But they said, drop out of high school, take your GED, and you can start taking unmatriculated college classes. You can get out. You can skip 2 years of high school. So I did that. And somewhere along the way, I had been in a classroom and someone had made a joke about a piece of wood that said, we were in like a shop class. And they said, you use the pine. They said, don't use that. That's some nice hardwood. They said, it's probably from the Amazon rainforest or something. And I was holding it and I went, imagine if it was actually from the Amazon rainforest. And I mean, I've always loved the idea of this giant rainforest to the horizon and all this mystery and temples and tribes and snakes and birds. And it sort of just lit this thing. And I started going, well, if Jane Goodall could go to Africa when she was in her early 20s, why can't, and Teddy Roosevelt was going on adventures. I said, why am I leading this boring life? And so I saved up my money and I bought myself a plane ticket to Peru.
And your first time down there was 18, I think?
I was 18 years old, yeah.
Huh. So you've talked about how you've tried to do work that's distinct from colonialist conservation. Because you, from the start, tried to have these deep partnerships with people who live in Peru, who raised in Peru. So can you kind of take us back to the barefoot machete days, and what are your earliest, or maybe not earliest, but some of your favorite memories of what you began to see and the kind of classroom of the Amazon, which you began to learn and pay attention to?
Yeah, and I mean, just to be clear, like when I got down there, it's not that I was trying to be uncolonialist or something. It's just that I got down there and I wanted to experience the Amazon with the people that knew it the best, and it's the locals. And so the first guy that befriended me was this guy named JJ, who had grown up in an indigenous community, grew up barefoot, grew up eating monkeys and piranha, learning medicines from his grandparents and parents, and he knew everything about the forest. And when I told him that I knew how to handle snakes, he was very fascinated. And then when I realized that he knew everything else about the jungle, I was in. And so we sort of exchanged those two things and developed this friendship. And so it was just this, it's like, I think everyone knows the movie Jurassic Park. They go to this island and they're told that there's going to be something there that they haven't seen. And then the first time they really see the dinosaurs, it's just this moment of absolute wonder. And the first time that I saw the Amazon rainforest, and we're going up on this boat, and here's this kid from New York that's seeing the jungle for the first time. And there's these millennium trees and macaws flying across the horizon, and there's just caiman on the sides of the rivers. And it was so incredible. And it was like the start of the movie. I just went, this is what I'm meant to do. I said, this is Adventureland. This is where I can get into some trouble.
So tell us more about the things that especially caught your attention in those early days of what you're really seeing and taking in.
I mean, a sensory overload is the jungle. I mean, the jungle is loud and complex. You're in this environment where when you walk through the jungle, you're underneath 160 feet of canopy. And so you're at the bottom of this ocean of vegetation, and you're this tiny little thing. The trees are far, 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 far above you. And 50% of the life in a rainforest exists in the canopy. Never touches the ground. So you have birds, monkeys, reptiles, amphibians, birds, mammals, everything is up there. And you're walking through, and it's, what I found really interesting was that no 2 days were the same. Literally anything could happen. You could be walking on a trail and a jaguar could walk out. You could be walking on a trail and a thunderstorm could roll in and the trees start falling over. And it's, it was just absolutely, it felt like Indiana Jones. It felt like I'd accessed some sort of like life video game. It was just incredible. And of course, there's the bugs to contend with, and you have to learn what, when you get out of the mud, you have to learn which types of mud. The classic is you don't know where to step when you get off the boat, and you take your first step and it's quicksand and you go up to your neck. And then you learn which mud looks like what. So then you step on the mud that you're not going to sink on. And so a lot of the early days was just making those mistakes.
Yeah. When you, at what point did you begin to go on the kind of the quest for anacondas? This happens fairly early, I guess, in your time there.
Well, immediately. I showed up and my thing was, I was telling JJ, I want to find all the snakes. And so we'd go out every night with our headlamps and we'd be looking for snakes. And I'd go, but where are the anacondas? And he'd say, well, on this river, there's not really so many anacondas. And I said, how come? And he said, because on this river, there are some loggers and some gold miners that go up and down, and they kill the anacondas because they're big, you can see them. And I said, well, I want to see anacondas. And so he said, well, maybe one day. And it was a year later, And I had gone home and come back. I'd done a college semester and come back. And JJ was like, well, you actually showed up. You actually came back. And so he invited me to his parents' house, and his mom and dad were there. And they said, once a year as indigenous people, we go on a family sort of hunting expedition. We go and hunt wanganas, which is the wild peccary there. We fish, collect Brazil nuts, go out for 10 days and then come back, and into an area that you're not allowed to go into unless you're tribal. And so they have indigenous status, and so they have access into the national park. And so they were like, just come with us. And so they brought me with them. And so we spent 10 days on this incredibly brutal expedition that was just beautiful. And we started finding anacondas. And we started finding these huge snakes on the side of the river, just soaking in the sun. And the first time I caught an anaconda, I'd caught smaller snakes. You catch them by the tail and you watch out for the head. And again, a snake would never bother a human. When you grab them by the tail, they're going to bite you so that you go away, and then they can escape. People get that wrong about snakes. They're all scared. They think the snake's going to attack them. It's never going to do that. But when you're dealing with smaller snakes, it's one thing. With a big anaconda, I grabbed this anaconda by the head to restrain her so that we could measure her, and she wrapped around my wrists. And then I realized even if I wanted to release this anaconda, I could no longer, because I had giant anaconda handcuffs now. And it pulled me to the ground. And then the next coil came over my shoulders, and now my shoulders are being constricted, and pretty soon my collarbone I could hear it creaking like a stick about to snap. And I was trying to scream for JJ for help, and he's running towards me, and I'm trying to I have no more air, because every time you exhale, they crush you. And so I was millimeters away from being crushed to death. And he got to me, he just undid the main heavy trunk of the snake that was crushing me. And I just took this breath, and I breathed again, and then we undid the snake, and everything was okay. But it was, you realize these snakes are a different magnitude.
Yeah, you tell a story about going finally to what you called the floating forest and finding this huge anaconda that you kind of ride for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny, at the time, nobody believed me when I told that story, but since then, we've had a few different encounters with a few giant anacondas. And when you're on these floating, there's places in the Amazon where the vegetation is floating on top of the surface of a lake, and there's these giant anacondas. I mean, I have a 6-foot wingspan from fingertip to fingertip, and I've tried to put my arms around some of these, and I can't touch fingertips. That's how big around they are. They're bigger than trees. And so trying to restrain these animals was impossible. And so the first one that I jumped on that was so big, it was just cruising, trying to get away from us. And I jumped on her, and she could have turned around and just ripped my head off. She could have just eaten me alive. She didn't. She just kept going. And so for a while, I was being dragged on the back of this snake. And I know how crazy that sounds. But I've seen it happen to other people too, because then as I've brought researchers back, we started, and that's the other thing, it sounds like lunatic behavior to be jumping on these giant snakes, but what we were unconsciously doing was developing a methodology for researching giant Eunectes marinus, which is the green anaconda in lowland tropical Amazonia. And today we've published numerous scientific papers on their ecology, because nobody else is willing to jump on giant anacondas.
Yeah, I imagine the waiting list is not long for that
not
opportunity.
long.
Yeah. So for those who may be simply unaware of the plight of the Amazon jungle, or if they weren't paying attention, in 2019 with the fires, or just simply haven't seen what's happening or aware of what's happening, give us kind of key markers or indicators that you began to see that were so troubling to you.
Well, I began to be concerned long before I arrived in the Amazon. When I was a kid, going to the Bronx Zoo in New York or reading Jane Goodall's stories, I mean, everything that you hear is that nature is in a state of emergency, that gorillas are going extinct, rhinos are going extinct, elephants are being hunted to extinction, the rainforests are being cut down. And so as a child, I found this extremely distressing. I said, if our world is being murdered, well, what does that mean? Are we at the end of times? It was a horrible, I actually think that it really did affect my childhood, in that I was trying to figure out if the things I was hearing were true. Because you'd go to the Bronx Zoo and they would show you these beautiful gorillas. Zoos have fallen out of favor right now, but conservation programs in zoos do have their role in keeping species safe. And the gorillas at the Bronx Zoo were incredible because, I mean, there's nothing, no video, nothing could stand in for the real life, visceral experience of being a few inches away from a gorilla through the glass and waving to the gorilla, and the gorilla waves back at you, and watching them interact with each other. And then when you move past the gorilla thing and you get into jungle land in the zoo, they show you the trees going down, and they show you the bulldozers and the logging trucks, and they tell you that football fields per second are being destroyed in the rainforests across the world, and this beautiful cacophony of life is being annihilated and may cease to exist. And so I said, I want to get out there and see it before it's gone. And so that very much contributed to my feelings of sort of depression and anxiety in life. I just said, how is everyone okay with this? How, and then early on when I was working in the Amazon, this stat came out, the Living Planet Index, where they said that since 1970, we've lost 50% of the life on Earth, of the wildlife species on Earth. Now, that's not the number of species, but that's the abundance of the species we have is 50% lower. And so when I heard that, I thought newscasters would take off their headsets, traffic would stop in the streets. I thought everyone would just go, okay, things have gone too far. We have got to do something. Nobody cared. And so when I got to the Amazon, I said, okay, is it really that bad? And when I first arrived for a few years, it was this paradise period because we were so deep in the jungle. It used to take 2 days to get to the research station, 2-day boat journey. And I don't think a lot of people understand the severity of a 2-day boat journey when you have a boat driver and a few of you on the boat and your supplies for the next few weeks, and you're going up this little tributary in the Amazon. And if something goes wrong, if the motor breaks, if you get stuck in a whirlpool, if you hit a log, you have no other options. You're stuck out there. There's no help coming. There's no 911. There's no helicopter evac. It's just you out there on the earth, which I found incredibly refreshing, to be outside of society, past the edge of human presence on the planet. And so we were working in very, very deep wilderness, and that was the whole point. And then JJ used to say to me, he said, one day we're going to have to protect this place. And I 18, 19 years old, and I'd say, what's going to happen? It's so big. There's jungle from horizon to horizon. What could possibly happen? And sure enough, he was right. He'd seen it happen. And that's what's happening, is that the roads are moving across Amazonia. The metastasizing tentacles of the Trans-Amazon Highway are moving across the basin. And that's a project that was funded by the World Bank and the IMF and Brazil and China to access the Amazon rainforest that had previously been inaccessible, to build this road across the whole thing so that they could pull out resources. And with the road comes these offshoot roads. They call it fishbone effect, where you get one road and then all these other perpendicular roads come off. And rainforest starts disappearing. And so one of those offshoot roads from the main Trans-Amazon Highway reached our river. And so I remember a day where we saw smoke on the horizon and we could hear chainsaws, and it was a patch of forest that we loved very dearly that I read about in the first chapter, where me and JJ had always been exploring. They just leveled it. And I remember saying, JJ, there has to be a way to do something about this. There has to be somebody that we can call. And he looked upriver, he looked downriver, and he goes, do you see anybody? He goes, do you see anybody you can call? He goes, it's just us out here. And so it became this sort of terrifying moment where I said, okay, now I've been here for a few years. I love this place. I know the animals. I care about them. I love this river. I love drinking out of this river, exploring these forests. And if it's being destroyed, I have to go tell people. I have to go do something. I just simply cannot. I was confronted for the first time in my life with a situation where I found myself unable to accept the entropy of reality, that the place that I love the most was going to be destroyed. And then I'm not even thinking, I was thinking about this selfishly, not even from the perspective of that the Amazon contains 1/5 of our planet's fresh water. The Amazon produces a fifth of our planet's oxygen, untold numbers of endangered species, indigenous cultures, undiscovered medicines. It's one of the greatest gifts we have. It's the crown jewel of nature on our planet. But that's, again, I'm not even thinking of it from a resource and sustainability perspective. I wanted to do it because I loved it. And so I started telling stories to everyone that would listen. I started telling them, there's rivers out there that are wild, where from century to century, nobody goes. There's just these wild places where the jungle breathes up mist, and there's macaws and species growing in the canopy that no one's named yet. And somehow this thing is the thing that regulates our global climate and keeps everything under control. And we're killing it, which means that for the first time in history, we are faced as a global society with a collective problem of, are we going to allow the systems that keep us alive to be put in jeopardy? Are we as a global society going to jeopardize the lives of future generations by destroying the ecosystems that make life on Earth possible? This is a tremendous thing. We've never had an issue this big. We've never been faced with something so all-encompassing that affects everyone on Earth. It doesn't matter whether you live in New York or Bangalore or Tokyo. This is important to you. The functioning of the Amazon rainforest is crucial to your survival. And so I had to start desperately trying to figure out a way to at least save our river. You can't protect the whole thing from the start, but you got to start somewhere to protect the whole thing. And I didn't have a PhD or a trust fund or any idea, and I didn't even have good grades. So I just had a machete and some bare feet, and I was just, all we had done is go on some crazy adventures. So I started writing them down and telling people, and I started booking talks at like the local outdoor stores and trying to, give little presentations. I just knew I had to start telling people. I just had this feeling. I didn't know what to do. I have now, at this point, running Jungle Keepers and having books out and documentaries. I get messages from kids and all over the world, and they go, "How do I get your job?" And I go, "I have no idea." I have no idea, because I have no idea how I did it. It's certainly not a job.
Yeah.
You can call it a calling.
Yeah.
But I'm like, kid, you don't want my job. Trust me.
When you, I suppose the last, 6 years especially have been kind of a turning point with those early years, little funding, little support, then with the video of the fires in 2019, that seems to have been a turning point for you, and then some funding that has rolled in the last number of years. So describe for us kind of some of the initiatives that you've been working at, and some of the successes that you've had.
Well, like you said, the turning point really came in 2019 when I had social media for a while. I had grown my social media a little bit. I understood the power of it. I understood that it was an important tool. And I'd already written a book. I'd written a book in 2014. I'd already written a whole book called Mother of God. I had gotten Jane Goodall's endorsement on it. I'd gotten published by HarperCollins. But even that wasn't enough. The book, people liked the book. It got good reviews, but it didn't become a bestseller or anything. And so, it was on the shelves for a while, and then it moved on, and I kept living in the Amazon and kept pushing past and doing the thing and living with JJ and bringing tourism groups. We've always brought people to experience the jungle with us. And some people worry about that. They go, is tourism good for the wildest place on earth? And it's like, look, imagine a football field, and you take a penny and flip it onto the football field. It's a huge field, and you're talking about this one little coin-sized spot. We're taking people there, and we have trails there. The rest, and that attention and that income allows the rest of the field to be wild. And so that's, easily can put to bed their worry on that one. But we continued to bring people and share the jungle and the love that we had for it, which was crucial, turned out, sharing that love. But yes, there came a day in 2019 when the fires were especially bad that year. It was the worst fires in I think, half a decade. And what happens is there's no natural fires in the Amazon rainforest. The dry season comes, and the invading farmers cut down, they slash and burn the forest. They cut down the ancient trees. They let them bake in the sun for a month, and then they light it all on fire. And so these, ecosystems that have been growing since the Eocene, since 50 million years ago, suddenly are just cut, killed. the system, the sacred cycle is broken. And I was standing in the 70-foot flames running through the wreckage, trying to salvage burning animals. And I turned my phone on myself and I was screaming at my phone. And I said, the Amazon is being destroyed every day. If you think that we can continue losing forests like this, you have another thing coming. And I said, we are trying to protect it. We know how to protect it. I said, we just need more support and nobody's helping us. And I'd never sworn before. Can I swear here?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. But I had never, I'd always tried to be a little bit professional on my Instagram and with what I put out and in my writing. And then on that particular day, though, I wasn't taking a video for anyone. I was just trying to document reality. And I finished the video with, I just said, this is happening every day. And I went, welcome to the Anthropocene. And when I put the video on Instagram, I remember I don't bring the phone into the bedroom. So I put the phone up on the refrigerator for the night, went to bed. And in the morning, the phone had vibrated off the refrigerator and was on the ground. And there was something like 40,000 notifications. 3 different news networks were on the phone. 2 hours later, I was in New York City at 30 Rock in like the last suit that I wore to a wedding, about to be on TV, with no idea what was going on. And they're like, what's going on in the Amazon rainforest? And all of a sudden, I was the spokesperson for what's going on in the Amazon rainforest. I was the person with the most visceral and recent experience in this tragic moment of the Amazon burning. And so I explained. And I went to a lot of different interviews. I was MSNBC and CBS and all of them. I did all the different morning shows. I went all around New York City and all to the West Coast, East Coast. And when that happened, then things started. And so then we sort of got this influx of people calling and people wanting to help. And at that point I said, well, I want you to help, but I didn't have any way for them to help. And so I hadn't figured that out yet. And so one guy came, this guy Dax Da Silva, he was the founder of a company called Lightspeed. He's a well-known businessman. He'd opened at the stock exchange. I believe he was already a billionaire. And he said, look, I want to use my wealth to help protect the environment. And he goes, I'm going to be choosing a bunch of different organizations. And he goes, I think I want to start my own organization where we help conservation projects around the globe. He goes, I'd love to help you. I'd love to help Jane Goodall. I want to help sea turtles. He said, but you're my first project. And he said, so what if I gave you guys funding, what would that look like? And we said, well, we need to buy land. We need to hire the locals that are the loggers and the gold miners to just be rangers. I said, we got to give them a better job. You can't fight these people. You have to help these people. These aren't our enemies. They're just people that are desperate, right? And that's something that I had learned from being there. It was like, JJ's, I think that's an insight that I gained, where I think a lot of people say, we need to fight the gold miners, we need to fight the loggers. And it's like, nah, most of JJ's brothers were loggers at some point. They're not bad guys. They're just guys who need money.
Yeah.
And so if you tell them, look, we'll pay you more, give you a t-shirt, benefits, and a community, and you get to ride the boat with us, and instead of carrying around a chainsaw, you can have a pair of binoculars. They're like, that's a good deal.
Yeah.
So they'll take it. And so I told Dax, this is this. I said, the other thing is, I said, I'm like 30 years old. And I said, I've never had a job or received a paycheck, and I don't even have enough money to buy myself socks and shoes and food and stuff. Like I've been living on a dream. I said, we got to find a way, at least for me and JJ, to have salaries, and we have to pay our rangers. So he put a budget together and said, look, would this work? And we said, yeah, that would work. And he goes, great. He goes, I'll give you, a 5-year commitment. And we said, are you serious? And at that moment, we started, and I had come up with this concept of jungle keepers. I thought it would be, I always liked give me this image of, the keepers of the jungle, the guardians. And I had already drawn the logo and, the mountains and the river and the thing. And I just made it up. And then all of a sudden, somebody heard the idea and said, well, we'll do it. And then we put it into practice, and then all of a sudden there was boats going up and down the river, and they had jungle keepers written on the side of them, jungle keepers. Okay. And we put it on like that for a few years, but then yes, it's been storytelling. Cause then, a few years after that, ABC News came down and did a feature on us because they're like, wow, these guys are doing good work. They're actually protecting some forests. We were protecting like 30,000 acres of forest, which is cool. It's a lot of forest. We'd saved a bunch of forest that was going to be destroyed. And they ended up doing Emmy-winning coverage of the frontline work we were doing in the Amazon. And again, so little by little this is now we're 10, 15 years into this, starting to get a little bit of recognition, starting to get a little bit of support. And different people showed up along the way. I have a friend, Mosin, who was a professional photographer, and he came down and started documenting the work that I was doing with JJ and started allowing us to share the imagery with the world, which was huge because I could tell all the stories I want, but until people see it in color, they don't understand it. You don't understand how it's really Avatar in real life. And then I think one of our biggest breakthroughs was the guy who used to run the health app at Apple, this guy, Stefan Thomas, came on a trip with us. This is, again, where bringing people to the jungle is important. He came on a trip with us and went, wow, what you guys are doing is incredible. This place is amazing. He said, but you guys are a mess. I said, I know. We're still barefoot. I said, well, I said, there's a million things we want to do, but we're doing all the jobs. I said, I'm doing, we're carrying the gasoline, filling the boat, paying the rangers, interviewing the loggers, driving up and down, looking for where the deforestation is, as well as doing the social media. He goes, you have 15 jobs and you're doing them all badly. I said, yes. And he goes, well, I'm a teams person. He goes, I run the most effective teams on the planet. He goes, I work at Apple. And I said, okay. And he goes, well, I want to help. And he sat down for like 10 hours and listened to me download him on everything that we were doing. Long story short, 2 years later, he no longer worked for Apple. He came to work full-time with us as one of the directors of Jungle Keepers. He found it so inspiring. And he brought us into the modern age where we became an official 501c3 nonprofit. We got ourselves rangers with payroll and medical benefits, and we got everything figured out. And we figured out a way to, when we had moments where the press got interested in us, we have a donor system where people around the world now give us $5, $10, $100 a month. And we have these jungle keepers all over the world. Regular people at home with their kids can send us $5 or $10 a month and then show their kids our social media and say, you're actually helping to protect the Amazon rainforest and all these animals. And so we found a way to include people in saving the rainforest and to then turn those people that would have been loggers or gold miners into rangers, boat drivers, chefs, handymen, guides. And so we're just bettering the lives of the people there. And so the model is biocentric conservation, where it's not just the animals and the trees, it's the indigenous communities as well. It's bettering the entire region. It's bringing everything up. It's win-win-win-win-win with no losses, with no negatives. If we see good loggers or gold miners, we give them better jobs. We work with the Peruvian authorities, we work with the indigenous communities, and we try and share it with everybody that we can.
That's lovely, lovely, lovely. It has been so delightful to see more and more listeners like you sign up for NSC Plus. Our growing community is made up of intelligent and thoughtful people looking for a holistic approach to human flourishing. Signing up for NSC Plus is also a way to support the show and the work we're doing, and in fact, we depend upon that kind of support. But in addition to supporting the show, you'll get exclusive access to bonus content, and the No Small Endeavor you've come to love will be completely ad-free. In fact, you won't even hear ads like this one. So go to nosmallendeavor.com and click Join NSC Plus to become a member of our community today. Join for as little as $5 a month. Again, go to nosmallendeavor.com, click on that red button that says Join NSC Plus to become a member today. I want to take a turn here and ask you some questions about your internal experience of all this, and your inner life around this beautiful work you've been doing in the world. And you kind of noted it a moment ago. You said something like you could consider it a calling. But let me begin with a question that just occurred to me just right before I got on the call with you. Was one of the ways in which the notion of greed is described is this desire to have, and then once one has, you want more, and you want more, and you want more. And so I started wondering, with doing the kind of work that you're doing, the subtitle of your book is something like How to Save the World, right? And here,
what it takes to change
the world. You've got 30,000 acres, you got 100,000 acres. What are you up to now?
130,000 acres,
right?
Yeah.
And obviously this is very different from greed, because greed is about, misplaced desire. And here you've got this beautifully placed desire. But it makes me wonder, how do you think about the work that it's never going to be enough, right? It's always going to be more and more and more you can do. So how do you keep yourself in this place of kind of joyfully doing good work and continuing to strive for what you can do without feeling overwhelmed with all that you can't do? Am I making sense in the question?
Yeah, you're making perfect sense. The only thing was you had it right until the end when you said, keep yourself joyfully doing this work. I mean, there's been so many dark ages, and I mean, years of just terror of, am I on the right path? Let's start first with, family and friends. When I first started going to the Amazon, going, when are you going to get a real job? What are you doing? Going down there and playing in the Amazon. I'd come back bruised, bloodied, infected, animal bitten, mosquito bitten, so seen terrible things. And these, people would be like at a barbecue wearing a pink shirt going, oh, you keep playing around down there in South America like vacation boy. And I'd be like, They didn't understand that I was watching the conquest of paradise and feeling compelled that I couldn't do anything else but try to be part of it. So there was that of like, am I ever going to have a normal life? Am I ever going to, financially, there's no one's going to pay you to do this. So all through my 20s, it was, come home and crash with mom and dad, which thankfully I was able to do. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do this. But still, that didn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like everybody else had jobs and was starting families and had careers. And, I was just living out of a backpack. I lived out of a backpack for 20 years. I slept outside. I've slept outdoors more than I've slept indoors. And so joyfully doing the work is not what it was. It's that I truly felt like this is the most important thing on earth. And so there's nothing else that I could do. And so I had to resign myself in a way and sort of say, this truly is so important that it is worth dying for. And in this case, it's not running into battle or meeting the enemy at the gates. It's saying, this is the hill I'm going to stand on and wave the flag because it's that crucial. This is life on Earth. And I believe that the defining issue of our time is saving these species. It's not just us. There's all these other animals that exist, and it's not just about the carbon and the quantifiable numbers. It's about that these other creatures exist for their own reasons and have their own communities and interactions and affection for each other and have a right to live. And so I wanted to save them, and so I was obsessed with that. And so it doesn't, you use the word greed. It's like I'm aware that greed is out there. I don't know if I've ever really felt it in the sense that I don't care what I have or don't have. I want this place to continue to exist. For me, that's a non-negotiable. The fact that my species is destroying the place that all the animals, and I've raised spider monkeys and giant anteaters, and I know the jaguars and the fish and the rivers and the trees, and they're my friends, and I mean that. And so for me, as the representative of the humans, I can't let my tribe destroy all the other ones. And so I have to be a voice for them because they can't come on an interview and they can't go to the United Nations and they can't go on podcasts and write books. And so I have to do it for them to say, hey, we're here and we might not be. And we guard you while you sleep by creating the living environment that you live in, by the way. And so no, it wasn't joyfully doing it at all. In fact, it was full of fear. And I think fear and sort of desperation because I felt like I also just I didn't want to give up then. I said, if I give up, if I go back to back and get a job, I'm always going to know that this is out here now. Now that I know, I can't go back. Once you know, you can never go back. And so once I knew that this was happening, once I knew that, well, then I said, I'm in this forever. And so that cost things, right? Like it cost relationships, it cost family. I mean, in my early 20s, I ran out and got married to the girl I was with, and we tried that, and then, you know, that ended up not working, because at some point it's like, hey, come home, be normal, stop with the jungle, enough jungle. You know, who's writing a book? Why are you writing a book? You know how hard it is to write a book? Books, you know, authors write books. You're not an author. You're just a kid. You know what I mean? It's like these people, the people around me were like, you're not, but the things you're doing aren't making sense. You're coming back with, you know, dengue fever and huge machete wounds. And they're like, you're acting like a crazy person, you know, or even writing a book. It's, you know, you're up all night writing a book for 2 years, you know, and no one can see where you're going. And no one's encouraging that. So you following the dream in this case cost everything. And so you literally have to get to the point that you're at rock bottom, sleeping on the dirt floor. And then again, even when you get those little wins, like, oh, HarperCollins published my first book, amazing. Do a few book talks, and you go back to the jungle and nobody cares. Keep going. Yeah, it's you know, you think, oh my God, I got a major publisher and I got this book coming out, and somehow you just imagine that it's going to take off and you're going to make all this money and you're going to have financial security, and none of that happens. You get a $100 check in the mail every 6 months, and a few people read your book and go, wow, that was a great book, man. That was incredible. I go, thank you so much. You know, and then we're back in the river with the machetes and the boats, and there's a new set of loggers cutting down trees up there, and we got to go confront them, and so we've just been, and then the last few years the graph goes really, really flat for a long time, nothing. The last few years have picked up, where all of a sudden we've got this huge influx of support, and the Jungle Keepers donor program has grown massively. Some of the podcasts that we've done, like when Lex Friedman had me on and Joe Rogan had me on, and some of the social media that we've been putting out, and some of the stories that we've been able to tell, that people just naturally share it because they go, whoa, we can't believe people are actually down there protecting the Amazon. We figured out a way to tell people about this, and to report back to people that, yes, the money that you're sending is helping to protect the forests, because I think with a lot of organizations, people will send money to, you know, name the top 10 organizations you can think of. You know, if you go look at their IRS 990, the majority of their funding goes towards advertising and paying their CEOs $500,000 a year. And the actual on the ground impact of $1 is like 3 cents. Whereas our organization looked at the impact of each dollar and said, okay, 50% is going to land acquisition, 40% is going towards rangers and community development, and then we're going to keep administration to 10%, no advertising. And so we tried a different model, and people can check and see. And so people give money, we save forest. People give money, we save forest. And so we've become the most direct way to protect the Amazon rainforest, which is a huge accomplishment. That's one thing that we're very, very proud of. And we can, you know, because we can prove that.
Right,
if anybody says anything, we go, well, talk to the IRS.
Yeah.
It's public.
Yeah. So let me you share in the book both stories of connecting with Jane Goodall, and then as well the Peter Beard, and they have a fascinating kind of contrast, at least with Peter Beard, as you relate the story there. It seems to be more about humans are a plague, and there's not a way. It's devastation and destruction and little hope. Whereas with Jane, there's more hopefulness, it appears, in her work. How have you thought yourself about navigating both of those? And what's the importance? It seems like there's importance in both of what both of them had to say. But I don't know, how have you thought about navigating that?
Well, you know, in my 20s, for a little while, Peter Beard seemed really cool and edgy. And I think I was scared of what I was seeing. And he'd written a book called The End of the Game about the destruction he'd witnessed and documented in Africa. and his whole, explorer gentleman with a camera and cigarette and, sort of, I don't care. I'm just here to watch, I said, well, maybe that's because for a while we we're going, well, man, we can't actually fight this. We're not actually going to save anything. So maybe I'm just going to go on crazy adventures. And the interesting thing is, I started life in little Italian, we're second, third generation Italian Americans, like, dinner at grandma's house on Sundays. Like, my dad was a teacher. My parents are both educators. Like, I come from a good family of working people in the New York area. Like, you come from the Shire, you're this delicate little thing, and they're like, we're going to send you to school, and you're going to have violin practice, and you're going to get a job. And at some point, you start going to the Amazon, and a few years pass, and now you're tough, and you've seen some crazy shit. And it's kind of like going to war, where then you come home and you go, well, this doesn't make sense to me anymore. I can't really go back now. And then, again, for me, it was like I went and got married to someone, a wonderful girl, but she was a rock climber and she lived in India and I was here, and we tried to make a intercontinental thing work, and it never did. But you have to at some point go. I remember sometime around the 12th year that I was working in the Amazon, sort of going, wow, this is no longer a project. This isn't some weekend retreat. Like, I'm slowly becoming this character. I am seeing it form. I was aware of it, where I was like, I'm not knowing the normal life expectations that they had for me when I was in kindergarten. That's not happening anymore. Now suddenly I'm on adventures and I catch anacondas and I'm trying to save the rainforest, and we have little wins along the way, and we might fail. So Peter Beard was very, very seductive because he was so cool. It was really cool. That was his thing. And so that's sort of, the world is burning and we might as well, light one and watch. And it's like, okay. And then I kind of, at that time, would have told you that I thought that Jane's message was a little bit, it seemed a little bit cute, a little bit Disney, we have to have hope, and that was youthful misinterpretation of the truth, because really, I think that tough exterior and that sort of I don't care, blasé nature is a trauma reaction to being overwhelmed by what you see happening in the world, whereas the continuing to hope thing is actually harder to maintain. Jane saw just as much destruction as Peter did, except she didn't lose hope. Her message was, let's educate the kids and make the world better. And that became her thing. And she talk about giving things up. She gave up her life and traveled 300 days a year for decades. I think for 5 or 6 decades she did that, just telling the world her message of hope and urgency to protect the wild. She said, if we're destroying the environment, then we are stealing from our children, and it's untenable. And so then when I finally met Jane and I realized, oh my God, she's not some sweet old lady. She's tough. She told me, she said, in so many words, she implied it, she said it kind of directly. It was an interesting communication where she said, I'm going to give you this endorsement. I'm going to, your book is good. I like it. I love it. But for me, as Jane Goodall, to tell you that, to publicly say that, I'm handing you something very important. And she said, I want to know that you're going to use it in the proper way. And what she was doing was giving me this Excalibur sword to go forth and make progress against the enemy. And that, publishers suddenly took us seriously, and funders suddenly took us seriously. And they said, Jane Goodall supports your work? I said, yeah, Jane Goodall loves our work. And that changed everything. Right. So by her just waving her wand in our direction, just a glance from the giant, she just went, yes. That changed the whole course of my life, gave me a career, made everybody take our work seriously. And again, just, we've talked so much now about the early days and the machete days and the struggle. And it's like right now, as I'm sitting here, we're protecting 130,000 acres. There are boats in the Amazon rainforest that have the Jungle Keeper's emblem going up and down river. We have 50-something people working for us. We have 7,000 monthly donors who are sending in small and large donations to help this whole thing run. And from the 130,000 acres that we have, if we can get that to 300,000 acres, the Peruvian government now that we're working with has agreed that we can make a national park and protect the whole rest of the river.
Wow.
And so now it's gone from, what do we do? There's nothing we can do. It's all being destroyed, to we are at the cutting edge of our field. We are the ones protecting the heartbeats and the ancient trees. And we stand a chance of making history because we're going to rewrite the narrative of conservation and we're going to save this thing. And that's why I'm in New York today, and that's why I'm talking to you, and that's why this book is coming out, because it's become something where now it's my duty to tell people that this kind of thing is possible.
Yeah. You used the word love at least twice since we've been talking, and your love for the wild, your love for the jungle, your love for the animals. And there are these beautiful passages in your new book that describe that love without using the word love. But you do use several times, I know at least one time you use the word sacrament, and you use the language of the church of the jungle. And so there's obviously this very deep sense of grace, this deep sense of gift, religious, theological language. Unpack some of that for us. How do you think about that beauty, that love, that embodied grace that you're experiencing?
Well, the context that I use the word sacrament in comes from that saying of that a sacrament is an outward expression of an inward grace. And in the jungle, drinking, where I grew up, you could not drink from the streams. And even when it snowed, the snow came from the sky. And I remember my mom used to tell me, don't eat the snow. And I'd be like, man, it's the snow. Like, shouldn't I be able to eat the snow? Shouldn't that? So the idea that like the world was clean, but we made it dirty, that really upset me. And so when I got to the Amazon, and I'm in the Amazon rainforest, but you can cup your hands and drink the water from the river. And then as JJ showed me, you could hold your hand up into the sun and watch the sweat come off your skin and literally join the vapor that is moving off the canopy into the air above the jungle. And then that turns into the clouds that form the thunderheads. And in the afternoon, it rains back down and becomes the river again. And you drink it and it comes out of your skin and it moves through you and you're connected. And so the river and the sky are flowing through your body and suddenly you're connected to the living universe. And so, as a child going to church on Sundays with my mom and my grandmother and my family, and you get a feeling of being in the presence of God, and you feel people praying, but being in the jungle for me was being surrounded by the maximum complexity of creation. And so to me, that's tremendously meaningful. And so I just get this swelling feeling of, you're in this orchestral, symphonic blast of life, and there's never been more life on Earth. There isn't any. The Amazon has more terrestrial life and biodiversity than anywhere else on Earth, not just now, but in the entire fossil record. And so being surrounded by that, which is the antithesis to all of the rest of reality, which is the frigid darkness of space, is where this Earth is still the only place that we know of that life exists. People like to talk about it like there's just life other places. Well, that's a big assumption. I mean, I like to talk about Santa Claus, but I still haven't seen him. What if this is the place that was made, and this is the staging ground for us to spiritually play out our quests? And, even if it's not, even biologically speaking, just the fact that this is the place that we exist. And if you leave our atmosphere, we die. If you change the temperature, we die. If there was no trees and no food and no soil and no water, we die. And it's like people have become so cavalier. And so to me, it's incredibly wonderful being in the emerald stained glass ceilings of the jungle where you're surrounded by life. And that is important to me.
Have you found the church of your childhood, the faith of your childhood, helpful or an inhibition to the work that you've done?
No, absolutely helpful. I think that a lot of the distress and sort of modern nothingness that everyone feels is because they've all sort of become either atheists or agnostics, and even mentioning belief in anything, let alone saying that you speak to God, has become incredibly out of favor. And then recently I was listening to a science podcast, and I heard them saying how they said, oh, I can understand. You can hear them almost getting there. They're too scared to do it themselves, but they're like, I can understand how having religious beliefs could help someone to navigate life and to sort of mitigate the nothingness that we all feel. And I was like, man, they're forgetting that the alternative is that if you are full of belief and conviction, and then you believe that life is full of meaning and that you're put here to for a much greater purpose than you could possibly understand, and your mission is to do the best you can at that, and that you have a duty to the people that you love, to your parents, to your friends, to your siblings, to your spouse, and that each one of us doing the best we can at that and avoiding the temptations and the pitfalls and the addictions and the tragedies and trying to uplift the world and save the environment is the game that we're all playing. And we're all united in it. And it's like, oh, wait, so maybe the nothingness you feel is because you forgot what game you're playing. And you don't believe in anything. And so when you go to sleep at night, you're laying there all alone because you forgot. And so that has become sort of comical to me, because I have not forgotten.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a huge asset that, my mom is so Catholic, and I'm very I wander around barefoot and, I'm much more relaxed. She really likes the
order,
the scripture. Yeah. She's in. Whereas me, I could wander into a church once a year and go, well, this is nice, just like the jungle. It's like, I don't need to be in a certain place, but that doesn't change what's in my heart. So.
That does remind me, one of my favorite interviews with a Catholic was Martin Sheen, the actor. And when I was talking with him, we were talking about some of his own experience with his childhood experience in the church, and then his leaving it and then coming back to it as an adult after very difficult times. But at one point he kind of turned it on me, and he said something like, "Do you pray? And what's it mean for you to pray?" And he said, "I'm always fascinated with that question, and to know what people mean or what they experience when they say that they pray." And so I guess you mentioning your Catholicism prompts me to ask, do you pray, or what does that mean or look like for you?
Absolutely, all the time, every day. And that's the way that you stay centered, grounded. I don't really understand life without some sort of prayer. And it's funny because I've never on an interview been asked this before, because everyone in the environmental world, you're talking to people that mostly are secular and concerned with science. And what's so interesting to me is that, somehow, and I keep hearing people say this, where they're like, oh yeah, science and spirituality are somehow opposing. And I'm like, science is the language of spirituality. You know what I mean? Like how on earth is that opposing? You're just looking at the text of the other thing. And so, but yes, a prayer is constant. And because you don't, and then but the best thing is I've been through so many intense situations with people, and you get these hardcore scientists who believe we're nothing more than biological entities, reproducing on a rock floating through space. And then when your boat's going down in a thunderstorm and you're being chased by tribes with arrows, you'd be amazed how quick they start praying. And I go, who are you praying to? I said, would you just make it up? I said, you've never thought about this before, but suddenly you're making deals. And it's really funny, because it's just, but no, I think that's something that I think it's going to come back. I think the pendulum's going to swing back, because I think that people are very, very lost right now, and there's a reason for that.
Well, as we move to a close, our last question, you say in the new book, you have this call for pick up the phone. I always pick up the phone, which is another kind of way of saying, a practice of saying yes and embracing what it is that you believe is set before you to do, and just keep leaning in and leaning in. So, for people who are listening, and they may or may not have a sense that their vocation or their calling is to do something related to the work that you've done, but they may have a sense of some sort of calling or vocation that they've kind of been perhaps hesitant to lean in and to answer the phone and to say yes. So unpack that a bit for us with a kind of closing call to courage in that regard.
Sure. First of all, you said, their calling may not be like mine. Well, I certainly hope not. Some of the most courageous people I know are the people who are holding a family together over the years and showing up every day for their kids. I mean, that's one of the most courageous things you could do. I mean, my parents did it. I watched my dad wake up at 4 a.m. and drive to his job and come home through rush hour traffic and then work a second job. And I watched my mom hold down the fort her whole life. And I see it with my cousins who are raising beautiful families. And, everyone has a different vocation. And, some people are going to go to the Amazon and need to wrestle anacondas. And other people, I just met a woman who was working with African tribes who have no access to menstrual pads for the young women. And so she's helping them to get them, because from this country, it's easy to get them over there. And so it's like they're helping. But then there's other things where people are making, using native plants and creating flower gardens that help the monarch and the hummingbird migrations in their own backyards with their kids. And I mean, just being a good human, again, just playing the game the right way, just being a good human being is enough of a vocation. I think that people forget that. And so helping other people doesn't take, you don't have to go far to find people that need help. And wildlife, and again, I make a big distinction between domesticated animals and wildlife. Domesticated animals are all over the world. They're something that humans have made, and sure, we can help them. But right now, wild animals, wolves, eagles, elephants, bears, salmon, those are the things that we are threatening so desperately, that are at risk of vanishing. And so we have to help them. But I think that whoever you are, no matter what you're doing in life, that when I say pick up the phone, what I mean is staying open to the fact that, when you get a phone call and it's from an unknown number, most people shut it. And I've always picked it up. And my whole life I've picked up. And most times, it's, hello, would you like to buy? I'm like, get out of here. You shut the phone. But every now and then you pick it up enough times. It might be a friend who just crashed their car and asked a stranger for a cell phone and is calling you out of desperation for you to come help them. I mean, as I write in the book, one time I had submitted my video to a website portal for a competition at the United Nations, and as a 20-something-year-old who just had some crappy footage of animals on a camera trap the United Nations called back, and we almost didn't pick up the phone because my dad thought it was a scam. And so I always pick up the phone. I pick up the phone all the time, but it is more of a philosophy than an actual deliberate thing. But it's just staying open. And again, you can't stay too open. I've also gotten myself burned. I tried to be a Discovery Channel TV star when I was in my mid-20s. You gotta be shrewd and you gotta be smart, but remaining open to new things, and just that thing, something new, pick up the phone, just see what it is, and that's led me here, being open to meeting JJ, being open to when my friend Mosin came down and said, I want to start documenting what you do. I said, what are you, crazy? He said, we're not doing anything. We're just, I thought I was so tough. His photos made it possible to share our work with the world. Stefan, I said, you working with computers. What do you know about the jungle? Well, you know how to organize a system and do everything that I don't know how to do. And so staying open has gifted us with everything we have, and brought in, I was just talking about this with one of my friends, where it's like, truly being good and having a clear conscience and knowing that you've done the best you can is not an easy high wire act to accomplish. And when you do it, we're doing the best we can. We're using the donations that we have. We're bettering those, saving lives in some cases of the people that we work with, certainly saving the lives of the animals and the trees, sharing inspiration and determination and forward momentum with everybody around the world as much as we can. and then it starts to snowball, and then even the people who come in and start to work with us, or the people that travel with us to the forest, now we've created the world's tallest treehouse so people can come and stay in the rainforest and see the invisible mist river above the Amazon, because I love to share everything with everybody. And so it begins to magnetize. And so, I think it's become a bit of a life philosophy to just keep saying yes, to keep staying open to things. So in the end, not becoming calloused and tough and sort of, jaded to the world, but staying quite, it's far greater of a feat to remain kind-hearted and gentle, and to remember for me, it's like, when you're, even the smallest of the heartbeats, even the little snake that you can hold in your hands. It's not all about the tigers and the elephants, and that's a metaphor. It's staying open.
Been talking to Paul Rosolie, author most recently of Jungle Keeper: What It Takes to Change the World. Paul, thanks so much. It's been really lovely to talk to you, and so grateful for your work.
It's been wonderful to talk to you too. Thank you for allowing this message to reach more people. I really appreciate it.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Our thanks to all the stellar team that makes this show possible: Christy Bragg, Jacob Lewis, Carrie Harmon, Jason Cheesley, Sophie Byard, Kate Hayes, Mary Evelyn Brown, and Audrey Griffith. Our theme song was composed by Tim Lauer. Thanks for listening, and let's keep exploring what it means to live a good life together. No Small Endeavor is a production of Tokens Media, LLC, and
Great Feeling Studios.